This is the Inno Chief Podcast, episode 384.
You have to completely slow down, and then you don't want to slow down too much that you're not moving forward. But the reality is not everyone's going to see it how I see it, and not everyone's got the same background. And also, I'm not always right. So I might move quickly and assume things, but then if I haven't asked the right questions or I haven't got this consensus of the team, I could be completely missing everything.
G'day, this is the Inno Chief Podcast, episode 384 with Jamie Kristow, CEO of Cotswold Outdoor Group, on optimising the retail value chain, adapting your pace of leadership, and championing AI innovation. I am your host, Greg Layton, founder of Chiefmaker and the Council of Chiefs. I believe there is a great chief in all of us, and that through listening to the stories, strategies, and techniques of great CEOs and gurus, each of you can find and leave your own legacy through your work and life. The Inno Chief Podcast is where you will learn how to think and make moves like a CEO, like a true chief. For over a decade, I've helped CEOs and senior executives around the world boldly lead change, inspire their people, and leave a legacy. On the Inno Chief Podcast, I bring these stories to life with deep diving CEO interviews, interspersed with minisodes covering key leadership challenges, so you will find your own path to greatness as an executive. In this episode, I chat to Jamie Kristow. Jamie is the CEO of Cotswold Outdoor Group, a leading outdoor clothing and retail group based in the UK. His career has spanned more than 25 years globally and includes direct-to-consumer retail experience across Australia, UK, Canada, and South Africa. Jamie has led incredible merchandising transformations for big brands like Target, Myer, Woolworths, Hudson Bay, and Suzanne Group, while championing that innovation is so critical to retail. He is just a wonderful operator with a brilliant track record of delivering results through data-driven decision-making, empowered teams, and customer-first thinking. In today's Retail Masterclass, Jamie will share a wonderful explanation of the busy and complex retail value chain and how to optimise for each component. Jamie will also share about following the rivers of money and building the product range through evolution, not revolution. Why time in store and walking in a customer's shoes are vital to turnarounds, and how shifting search behaviour, retail media, and AI pricing are reshaping retail growth. Now, Chiefs, if you're not in retail, the lessons learned here are still incredibly valid. I spend a lot of my career working across different sectors, and I can tell you almost every industry or profession can learn from what retail has to do to make a buck. So Chiefs, without further ado, let's hear from the superb Jamie Kristow of Cotswold Outdoor Group.
All right, Chiefs, I'm here with my great mate, Jamie Kristow. Jamie, welcome to the Inno Chief.
Hey, Greg, nice to see you.
Mate, you know the tradition here at the Inno Chief. We love to know where our Chiefs come from. Can you tell a story that sums up your childhood and early life?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a very fortunate childhood. It seemed to be the sort of days when life was freer and easier. Maybe I've got rose-tinted glasses, but yeah, I grew up in the UK, a very supportive parents who really pushed me forward in terms of anything that I wanted to do, whether it was getting the latest BMX or the latest pair of football boots. They were super supportive parents. So yeah, had to have real fun, really enjoyed school. Really enjoyed getting involved in lots of sports and team games. And yeah, I can't really complain about the childhood I had. So yeah, lots of very positive memories.
Superb, mate, superb. Okay, but what was your first ever paying job?
I'm going to skip the paper round, which is always hard in the UK on those winter nights. And I'll go to working for my dad. So my dad had his own electrical contracting company. So he was an electrician by trade. And I suppose from about the age of 13, 14, which I don't think would be legal now, I was out on building sites every half term or summer holidays or Christmas holidays and being a sort of labourer on a building site working for my dad. So that's for a 13, 14-year-old young, fairly naive boy, that sort of brought me into the world relatively quickly. Lots of stories from my dad's mates and some of which I'm sure my mum wouldn't wanted to hear. But yeah, it was a really good time. So really hard work, really taught me the sort of importance of working hard. Also, really instilled in me that I probably wanted to work hard so I could do what I wanted to do. But yeah, that was probably my first real job. It was pretty tough entry to the world, but I enjoyed it. It was good fun.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I bet some of those stories have probably never left you.
Probably best that way, I think.
What was your first ever car, Jamie?
We inherited as a family my granddad's car, which he had loved and adored for probably 20 or 30 years. It was a Nissan Sunny, a red Nissan Sunny, and that car had been immaculately looked after for years and years. And safe to say, as an 18-year-old getting his first car, probably didn't quite get the love and attention that it probably should have had. But yeah, that was a good car, and I'm forever grateful to my granddad for passing that car down.
Jamie, let's just talk about how your career progressed now, because you actually have followed a bit of a journey around the world and you followed all these retail giants. And I think I track you now as working on at least 4 different continents. It might be more than that. I certainly know Europe, UK, certainly know Africa, definitely Australia, definitely North America. Talk us through the journey from so how you come up through the ranks to finding yourself now in the UK CEO of a significant retail chain.
Yeah, I think it's been a story of the Commonwealth, traveling around the whole Australia, the UK, Canada, and South Africa so far. So yeah, it's been a very privileged and wonderful journey. It all started for me, left university in the UK, like many people, wasn't 100% sure on what I wanted to do or where I was going to end up. And I'd always done retail jobs alongside my education in supermarkets or department stores and fell back into that, into retail. So I think it started, I moved to London, worked for Accessorize in branch merchandising roles. So transitioned from the shop floor to the head office or support office functions and absolutely loved it. And one thing led to another, and I was Accessorize and Monsoon, and that was in branch merchandising. So that was good for me. So it connected the dots of working on the shop floor to then being a real key conduit in making sure that stores had the right stock package. Interestingly, that first role at Accessorize, I think I moved to London, and you never really get paid what you need to survive on in London. And so Monday to Friday, I worked in the office. And then Sunday, I worked at the Trocadero store in Leicester Square. So yeah, that was quite an experience. I had all my sort of all the assumptions and all the ideas and all the strategies in the office Monday to Friday. And then the reality of how those things come together or don't come together on the shop floor on Sunday. So that made me really accelerated my sort of learning and knowledge, because I'd come in on Monday and everyone would be saying, okay, this is working because of this reason, or this is not working because of that reason. I was going, well, actually, the customers are actually saying something different, or that stock isn't doing what it's intended to do. So it was a really important learning of understanding, being on the shop floor, talking to customers, talking to store managers, and understanding that not all those things that you want them to be or seem to be from looking at reports in the office sometimes play out that way. So that was a really good learning. And then after that, it transitioned into working in store planning functions for House of Fraser, and then into core merchandising functions, which really gave me the foundational experience for the rest of my career. And then was lucky enough to move to Australia in 2005 and just continued that journey. So merchandise planning, which then led into the more senior roles, and being very fortunate to then work for some of Australia's leading fashion brands and bigger chains for the next 8 years. And then a pivot, moved to South Africa, which was great, to work for Woolworths in Cape Town, which was not only a great career opportunity, but also a huge life opportunity, the opportunity to live in Africa. And I know you spent a lot of time there, Greg, but living in Cape Town and just seeing the world from a completely different perspective was a real game changer for me and my family. So yeah, and then it's just continued back to Australia, various roles in Australia. And then most recently, I found myself back in the homeland of the UK, running a business over here. So yeah, it's been a fascinating journey, and one of which I look back gladly on.
As an outsider from retail, like me, when I first started working with you guys at Target, would be more than 10 years ago now, I think. What goes on behind the scenes is actually, it's quite eye-opening, because the average person has no idea of what goes on in this store support service unit in the back end. Can you explain, like you were head of merchandising for companies like Target. What does that mean? What do you actually do? Because everyone else thinks, hey, they just put some Fatal Out shirts on the counter They put something else up and there it is. And don't you just make a buck? How does this work and why does it go wrong?
It's really busy, it's really complex, and it's becoming even more and more complex. But I mean, I think there are still some very simple philosophies in terms of trying to keep things simple because it's very easy to overcomplicate retail. But it depends who you're working for. But if you're working for someone like Target, you're a fully vertical business. So you're really in control or have the accountability of everything from the supplier. So in terms of fabric sourcing to production management to manufacturing, even though you don't own the factories, you manage the factories and you have partnership relationships with them. So you're having to really work everything right back through from country of origin, right through your whole value chain and right to the customer. Now, that's a complicated process just operationally, but then the bit even before that is understanding the strategic part. So who is my customers? What do they want to buy? If you're in fashion, what are the seasonal trends? How does that change over time? How does color, how does fabric change over time? So there's so many different inputs that are going into those initial decision makings from a product and from a customer point of view. And then you've got the financial element of it. So how much stock shall I buy? How much do I need to pay for things? How much shall I price things in the market? And then for a business like Target, then when I joined, we had just over 300 stores. Which ranges do I send to which stores? How much does Chatham get versus Wagga? I mean, the complexity is huge. And within that account that you have big teams, but it's so easy to make small mistakes that make big differences. So you've got to be really disciplined and you've got to, we used to have a bit of a theme called what are the attributes of success? So when we're building a range out, we'd be looking to understand what are the attributes of success or what are the things that haven't worked. And really, if you can try and continue to replicate those season on seasons and go for more evolution rather than revolution when you're ranging, then you limit the risk. So we had a term, also another term called following the rivers of money. So if you can understand that the left side of your spreadsheet is last year and the right side of your spreadsheet is how you build out next year, how do you translate what really worked last year, what really worked for the customer into your rankings next year? And then build on those, I suppose the icing on the cake. So how does the color slightly change? How does the silhouette slightly change? But don't make big swings or don't make big changes because those big changes might not resonate with the customer. And when you're buying tens and hundreds of thousands of units of a program at Target, if you make big changes to an item, that can cost you a huge amount of money. So it's just understanding how that comes together and then flowing it all the way through. And then the really important bit is then how do you, if you work in quite a central function like merchandising and buying, what is super important is how you communicate to the business because you are in effect holding a lot of the upstream knowledge, but then you've got to hand that baton over to marketing, to visual merchandising, to store operations team, to supply chain, to the digital team. And if you don't hand that baton over very well, the rest of the business can't function. So there is a whole piece of value chain management, which is super important, and you don't always get it right.
Oh, mate, that was such a good description of how complex retail is. And if people's minds aren't being blown right, even having worked in it myself with you guys, I still think when you talk that is amazing.
It's super complex. And if you fast forward to now, because that when I was at Target, 2017 for a few years, if you fast forward to now, there's probably 50 times more disruption than there was then. So the whole
Yeah.
the digital evolution in the last 8 to 10 years has been rapid and is disrupting how retailers come to market significantly.
Yeah, I like how you describe that sort of follow the river of money from one side of the spreadsheet to the other, not big changes. Well, I did ask a few people about you before you came on the show. There's one guy who you used to work for called Andre Reich, who became the CEO of a number of different companies, and we're trying to get him on the show. But I said to Andre, what is special and unique about Jamie? And he said, first thing he said is, my God, that guy is smart. His ability to see all the different little bits of detail and somehow get to the point. And the one thing, he said, he's never seen anyone who could do that like you could. And I thought to myself, how on earth do you do that? I mean, I talk about cognitive overload and that normally happens at 5 to 9 kind of things. You just described a living, breathing ecosystem that goes from all the way to someone who walks to a factory in the middle of probably Asia most of the time, all the way through to someone at the shop floor who's thinking, should I buy this or that? When you make a call and you're saying, we're going to get this range of clothes, we're going to put it in these stores, as you said, it could be 10,000 things, but you don't know for how long before you know if that's worked or not. Is that 6 months? Is it 12 months? I mean, how far out are you planning?
For someone like Target, you're over a year out. You're a year to 18 months out, depending on the decision that you're making. So
That is hard, right? It's not like sport or even a lot of businesses, you know how this is going to work. You're making a bet on that system, on that customer 18 months out. Now, Chief, do you find yourself at work in one of those incredibly stressful moments where you've got someone on your team that either isn't performing or is behaving poorly, and you know deep down that it needs a difficult conversation? One of those ones that can keep you up at night. You know, if you get wrong, there's going to be HR issues, but you know, if you get right, it could actually be a little bit career defining, and it will make life so much better for so many people, but you just keep putting it off and off and off. Well, Chief, we've created the ultimate resource for you. It is called Difficult Conversations. What's in it is what's most powerful. The mindsets, the frameworks, and even some of the scripts, the words to use to make those conversations much more easy. Just go to chiefmakeup.com/difficult and you could download the full resource right there. Okay, Jamie, you're really good at this end-to-end business. You just explained something complex. How do you think about it? How do you break this down? Do you use spreadsheets? Do you use mind maps? Do you have some sort of core framework that you use in the background to help guide your decision making?
yeah, I mean, I think I've always been able to cut through the data pretty quickly, but I think it's how you validate those hunches or those instincts. Because I think in big business, you need to validate what you're doing. You can't just say, I think it's this or I think it's that, because the decisions and the consequences are too big if they fail. So if I go back to I suppose my opening jobs in retail, it was always the validation of walking the shop floor or being in the customer's shoes. So I think various businesses or all businesses that I've been in, I've tried to start in the stores. So my current job, I spent my first 3.5 weeks touring around the UK, visiting shops, listening to customers, talking to customers, and also talking to our store colleagues. And I think that's been the same at anyone I worked at Witchery or Country Road or Target or whichever retailer. I've always tried to over-index the amount of time that I spend in stores. So I think Witchery was a great example where the business wasn't doing very well. This was back in 2010. It was a bit confused about where it was. And so I said, and I was getting really mixed messages in the office. And I had a view of what I thought needed to happen. And this was my first MD appointment as well. So it's a big step up, first big job. And then it felt like a relatively easy play in terms of working it out. But I didn't want to make big decisions without having that validated. So I had all the numbers, I could see what was going on in terms of what was working or not working, but I was getting really mixed voices in the office in terms of where we move forward. So what did I do? I spent the next month visiting stores. I walked around the stores and you tend to hear the same story repeated to you. Okay, where do we need to go? What are the problems? What are the customers saying? And you get a very simple narrative that starts coming through from people that talk to the customers every day. They see the things that don't work. They see the things that do work. And a lot of our store colleagues have been in the business for 10, 15, 20 years. So they've seen the whole journey. So you start bringing all that information together and you're getting that sort of that anecdotal feedback from the store managers. And then it all starts to just sink into your mind and the aha moments start coming through. So you take that knowledge back in and then that's one point, it gives you a very clear clarity of mind. And then I take all of that information from the stores and I match it up with the data to see if it all matches up. And in terms of, so I think that then brings to life in terms of the view of the office, some of it is right, some of it is wrong, and then validates that with the store. And then you combine that with the data. In terms of how you pull that together in frameworks, I think the framework that we used at Witchery, one that was brought through from Gresham Private Equity, was the Agenti framework. And that was the ability to put a simple strategy on a page, starting with a SWOT analysis, etc., and give you a really clear a really clear view in terms of how to write your strategy. And I think for anyone who's writing strategies, if you can't write it on a page and if you can't pitch it in an elevator, it's too complicated. So that was the framework that we've learned now. And I've built various additions to that over time from working with different people. But I think that just really speak to the people who are in the business, speak to the people who are at the coalface, speaking to the customers all the time, and you'll get very simple validation if what you're doing is right or wrong.
What did the workers on the shop floor at Witchery, what was it? What did they keep saying to you that worked? Like, was there a product set or something? They were like, oh man, why don't we do more of this?
Yeah, and look, everything's done for the right reasons and with the right intent. But I think that the business had got a little bit heavy on inventory, and I think it had got a little bit too complicated on the fashion side and was probably trying to be too fashionable. Now, Witchery is a very well-placed brand in the Australian marketplace, but at that point, I mean, it was interesting when I joined the business. So I'd come from Country Road, went to Witchery. When I was at Country Road, everyone was worried about Witchery and everyone was talking about what the Witchery guys are doing. When I got to Witchery, I thought, okay, well, these guys are going to know what they're doing. They're going to be super slick and super sharp because they're like the darlings in the market. And when I got to the buying meetings at the Witchery business, everyone was worried about what Country Road was doing. So that was an interesting insight for me. And fundamentally, there wasn't a true North Star. So, and then the insight from the stores was, can we just go back to what we used to be known for? Can we just go back to that timeless, elegant, sophisticated witchery that made us famous in the early 2000s? And then we had this other view that was like be very fashionable and catwalk to store as quickly as possible, but it wasn't resonating with the customer, and that could show in southern numbers. So I had a view, but then I said, okay, well, I'm going to need some more validation on this. So we engaged with an external customer data company. I think it was a company called Future Brand, who were fantastic. And they helped us hold the mirror up to the business. And they did with a combination of quant and qual research. So it was customer insights. And we did loads of customer forums and shopping nights. And then we got that view that was going to the store managers, but we got it through a professional forum, one that could be then very much linked to our strategy, played up to the board, etc. And I think I'll always remember this in terms of the two words that we played back to the business. And this was quite confrontational at the time, but we hold up two words, or not me, but the customer research hold up two words to the buying and design and product teams. And basically, the customers were telling us that we were pricey beige.
Pricey beige.
Pricey beige. So we were expensive. Prices had probably gone up too much. And we were beige or bland, however you want to interpret it. But we were like expensive, blah. So expensive being the pricey beige. And that was quite painful for the business to hear. But I think it took that confrontation or that agitation to manage the change, because then once we had the unveil of those two words, we had the debate, and this took a few weeks to work through. We could then, I think you sometimes have to hit a business quite hard with some truth to actually make a step change, because I think if it's too subtle, it won't change enough. And then we pivoted quite hard. So I think everyone started to understand what that meant, and then we started to map out where we needed to go in terms of this new compass. And this took many weeks, Greg, but we then landed on brand identity and focused on more style and sophistication in our ranging. And the business all got behind it. So, we laughed a year later with all the design and product themes that this is where we were and this is where we were going. And the results came. I mean, that business that continued to grow and resonate with the consumer based on that strategic work was doing for many years afterwards. So, and then it was amazing then to see that. You talk about the 12 months later when that new product direction started to hit stores, and one in terms of the sales results that started to come through, but just the joy and the hope that you could see on the store managers' faces when the product handwriting really started to change. So, and it's not uncommon for businesses to sometimes lose their compass or lose where they're going. I think that's the importance of always having those customer insights and understanding what your customers are saying and what they want you to be is super important. And if you disconnect from that, then I think it's really, really easy to lose your way.
Jamie, you just gave a great example of how you use the customer insights to realign a business. You and I have been on the journey a little bit. We know it's not always that easy. We know brands can lose identity a bit, but right now there is a colossal challenge for businesses about what we say, sticking to core business, stay close to your core game, build around that rather than getting lost beyond aligning to customer, which you just described so beautifully. Is there anything else an organization should be doing now to stick to core and really just be focused on who they are?
Yeah, I mean, I think buying the merchandise in and understanding who your brand identity is one part of it. I think the retail is changing so much and will continue to change rapidly in the next 2, 3, 5 years and onwards. I think the side of it that we're grappling with as a business is really understanding the search journey. So if you think of commonly most retail businesses will spend money with Google, they'll spend money with Meta, and they'll have a framework or a construct in terms of how they can channel people into their stores and onto their website. I think what is rapidly changing is how customers are searching. So whether it's TikTok or whether it's ChatGPT or various other mediums, and these mediums will also change in the next 5 years as well. There'll be new ones that come along. Understanding that customer journey and how that customer's journey is changing, I think is going to radically change retailing in the coming years and how you adopt to that. So I think data has always been important, is becoming more and more important. If you don't have your data organized and constructed in the right way, then you've got some real problems. And then it comes back to the customer piece again, but just the customer journey is changing. People just don't rock up to shops or look in the windows anymore. They navigate your business in various different ways, whether it's through social, whether it's through search channels, whether it's through Google Shopping. There's various different ways to find a business now. So if you need to make sure that your data and you've got a really agile sort of IT setup to make sure that you can be competitive. So they're the things that I worry about at the moment, is just how that customer journey is radically changing and how you keep up with it. That for me is the thing that keeps me up at night.
Yeah. So you just keep aligning back to that.
Yeah, it comes back to customer journey, but if you're not attuned, if you're not reading, if you're not listening to what's going on in the world, you'll continue just to you'll run your business model in an old way of working or an old understanding, which may have been relevant 10 years ago, but that is completely changing. One of the other things that we're also thinking about is how do we, in our UK business, change our business model to a degree. So, and it depends on what type of business you have. So I work in a current business that sells a lot of brands and sells other people's products, and we're an expert at selling those products. But we're now thinking about how we expand other revenue streams, even from retail for us as well. So we're looking at retail media as a big strategy that we're adopting now. So that's a relatively new technology in the retail world that can create an incremental revenue stream for you. But we've not really set it up in that way because of that end result. We've set it up in a way to actually create a more engaging customer experience. So mapping the customer journey out, working through how we can engage with customers. And my observations from my first 3.5 weeks in this business, when I worked just in stores everywhere from the Southwest right up to Scotland over a month, was that our in-store experience wasn't very engaging. And we sell very expensive walking shoes or technical products or insulated coats or waterproof jackets, and that have a huge amount of product information. And when you go into our stores as a customer, you just weren't getting a huge amount of that information unless you spoke to someone, but someone's not always available, or some customers actually would rather just navigate themselves. So you see a lot of people walking around with phones, but our stores weren't really telling you very much. And then when on the flip side, you have our partners, so, big brands like the North Face or Patagonia or Arc'teryx, etc., who have so much product and brand information that they want to get to the customer, but they have a very limited way of doing it. So then we said, okay, we've got two problems. So we've got a customer problem and lack of engagement. We've got a brand problem. They want to market with us, and a lot of our brands only have a very small physical presence, whereas we have 75 stores across the UK and Ireland, so a very big physical presence. So there's two competing problems that need to be solved. And then, so we worked out that the retail media strategy is a way to do that. So we start to pivot and think of ourselves as a media house. We have the ability to then create a solution, whereas brands can advertise in our stores. They can talk to customers through digital screens or through activation zones or through product placements on our website or through our social media channels. we have the ability to then more directly connect the consumer directly with the brand proposition, which helps the brands because they tell their journey, which helps the consumer because they're more engaged and they get educated on the products that they want to sell. And the retailer benefit is that we create a media platform that can create incremental revenue. Or you look at it the other way, it actually just increases your marketing contribution because there's more marketing money that comes into your business. So whichever way you look at it, it's a win-win for the retailer, it's a win-win for the customer, and it's a win-win for the brand. So again, that's going back to trying to solve that customer journey issue and using tech now as an enabler to do that. So that's one of the things that we're working on at the moment, which is a way that retail is evolving because retailers are going for it really relatively tough, as everyone knows, and it's the same for most industries, but rising costs, sluggish demand, whichever way you look at it, is getting harder. So we can create another revenue stream in our business. It becomes a bit of an insulator in the P&L that can protect us against tougher macroeconomic or political headwinds that we can't necessarily control.
Jamie, I just want to switch the script a bit now and talk a bit about your career journey and executive excellence. When you became MD, CEO for the first time, what was the one thing that maybe happened you didn't expect? Was there something about the role that you went, wow, I didn't realize there was this much of this, or not, none of that, or anything like that about the role transition that surprised you?
Yeah, I think it's just the breadth of things that you have to get involved in and then the problems that you need to solve. So in any business, in any career, grow up through an area of expertise. For me, it was buying and merchandising. And then all of a sudden, you're having to manage the retail team, the brand team, the visual merchandising team, the finance team, IT, or however your business is constructed. And I think my immediate default to that was, I'm not an expert on IT. I'm not an expert on visual merchandising. I'm not an expert on running supply chains. So I think one of my mistakes I made is I was like, oh God, I'm going to have to become an expert on everything really quickly. But I think you learn over time that you just need to make sure that you've got the right team, the right people, and the right strategy framework. And then you're in effect, your role is to manage and support people, to remove barriers out of the way and just provide a clear vision and a strategy that everyone can galvanize behind. And then, yes, you have to have an understanding of how different business functions work, and you learn that over time. But in that first appointee role, don't doubt yourself. Don't think you have to be more knowledgeable than your head of supply chain or more knowledgeable on IT than your CIO. If you construct your questions well and you engage with your team well, they can educate you along the way. And because you don't have to be an expert on everything, you just have to be a good generalist. And I think that was the first thing that was the biggest shock to me, was you don't have to be good at everything. You just have to ask the right questions, and you just have to make your team accountable in terms of what their roles are. But yeah, when the first gig that you get is very overwhelming.
Has anyone ever given you courageous feedback from the heart and it was really good for you because even though it might have stung, you knew you needed to hear it?
Yeah, and it was about that time. It was in that business. So you kindly described some of my better attributes earlier. I move at pace. I move relatively quickly. But the downside of that is you move at pace and you move relatively quickly, and people aren't always ready for that. People can't necessarily see where you want to go. And I think I probably made some mistakes along the way of not taking people on the journey at the right pace and probably moving too quickly. And I've had a lot of coaching since then and spent a lot of time working on myself. So I know where my blind spots are. And I think if I get stressed, that's the area that I lean into more, and I get more pacey, and I have to really slow myself down and make sure I'm not moving too quickly.
You almost that's the opposite of what your instinct is telling you.
Yeah, you have to completely slow it down, and then you don't want to slow down too much that you're not moving forward. But the reality is, not everyone's going to see it how I see it, and not everyone's got the same background, and also I'm not always right. So I might move quickly and assume things, but then if I haven't asked the right questions or I haven't got this consensus of the team, I could be completely missing everything. And I think you're more powerful as a team than you are as an individual. And even if you do think you have the right answer, wait and get the collective view. And I probably didn't do that as much as I should in some of my earlier roles. But in terms of, to answer your question, in terms of the feedback, in terms of how this sort of pacey director type leadership style came across, I had a very supportive boss called Ian Nan, who continues to be a friend still this day. So he was an absolutely brilliant retailer. And Ian was very complimentary of me, very supportive. Every one-on-one was great. I had my little tick list, which he always used to laugh at. And things were going very well, and he was a great supporter. But I think it was a mid-year review or an annual review. We sat down one day and he was generally happy with most things and it was all good. And I think the meeting was coming to an end. And he said, there's just one thing. He just said, in terms of how you can come across with the team, he said, just watch your style, and some of it relates to pace. And he said, sometimes you can be perceived as being quite cold. And it was that piece of feedback just hit me so hard, because I'm generally quite personal people and want to have good relationships with people. And to think that I could be cold or not supportive, it hit me really hard. And he was probably right. He was 100% right. If you're working at pace, and this is my first big job, and I was probably trying to do really well because I've always been highly competitive, and that highly competitive red director style in a predominantly female fashion environment office probably wasn't the right way to approach it. So that made me, that stayed with me to this day. And if I'm in that situation and I'm busy and if I'm pushing too hard, that comment always comes back, and it helps me just to reflect, be calm, and make sure that I'm not being cold. Or if I am, then I think one of the positive traits I have is I can be reflective. So if you are in that heat of the moment and everyone gets busy and stressed, I think having that level of reflection and going back to someone and say, hey, that I probably didn't handle myself as well as I could have done in that meeting, and let's talk about your point of view on that. I think people appreciate that if you can come back and say, yeah, I probably could have handled that better. So I think, and as you get older, you learn and you make mistakes along the way. And, that's my watch out. I have to manage my pace. So I just have to make sure I'm not trying to push everyone too hard. And I think if you can have that level of reflection and be humble, then that stands you in good stead.
What's the toughest piece of feedback you've ever given someone else?
I'm a big advocate of accountability. And I think if you can be accountable in everything you do, then ultimately you'll be successful. And I think I had to deliver some feedback to someone where I didn't think they were owning the journey and didn't think they were being accountable. And that's quite a hard piece of feedback to land with someone. So that's probably the hardest piece of feedback I've had to learn with someone.
How did you say it, Jamie? Tell us how this went down. Did it go well or did it train wreck?
It tends to not go that well when you deliver it.
Yes, this one's tough to get right. Yeah.
It's a tough one, but I think if you back it up with examples, I think the conversation that we had, I think I just ripped the Band-Aid off and said, I don't think you're being accountable. And I think, you need to own the journey. And then you tend to get the guard that comes up in it. But I think the next conversation we had, that person came back and said, I think you're right. I think I do need to own it more. But yeah, they're never easy conversations to have, and not ones I enjoy having, but I think people tend to appreciate it. If you say it in the right way, if you say it in a way that's supportive, and you say it in a way that you are also accountable in terms of making them successful, then I think it can land well. I think if you land conversations in a way that's just, oh, you're not accountable, well, then I think as a manager, then you're also not accountable, because your role is to help support them, guide them. So I think in any tough conversation, if it can be done in a way that's showing support and with empathy, then those conversations land in a really positive way. And I think if you then back that up with, this is where I see where there can be a level of improvement, and this is how I think we'll get there, then you can start to map a journey in terms of changing behaviors.
I think when I go back to the example of the feedback that Ian gave you, and then really what I'm going to say is a gift, even though it was a tough gift, right? Almost a bit like a shit sandwich, but some of the best moments in your career are on the backside of someone giving you hard feedback. And sometimes people have never been told. And I think what I tend to come across a lot of is people have never been led well. And so no one's ever had a standard. No one's ever been good enough to hold them accountable. Like great leaders hold people accountable. great fans give and good teammates give great feedback. So I think it's just such an important thing to get right. Jamie, one of the things that springs to mind is the principle of using time horizons in your planning to create focus now, and then step 1, step 2, step 3. We'd use the fix, reset, grow, change your game feedback, another one called the alchemy of growth. Just want to talk through a bit of an example of how you've used that.
Yeah, I mean, we used that at Target. I think that was with your help and support, Greg, at that time. But whether it's fix, reset, grow, or whether it's the 3 horizons framework, you can't do everything in the first year. And that is probably the biggest mistake that I've seen teams doing is you have this, whatever strategy framework that you use. And we had a great one at Target called the 6 P's and C's. And you, in effect, get your strategy on a page and then you start to break that out in terms of more detailed initiatives. And you can have a really engaging few weeks with the team to try and work out, this is where we are, this is where we want to go, this is our vision, our mission, our purpose. And then you break that out into the functional areas. And the 6 P's and C's is good. So the 6 P's and C's is built on the sort of traditional 4 or 5 P's, depending on what industry you're in, but it's bookended by customer and profit. And the Target, that was what we used, and it was really helpful because, again, you're anchoring around customer in terms of what the customer mission is and who you're trying to serve. Target, we were in a turnaround, so with the other bookend was profit because we needed to make money, and then we just sandwiched in the product, price, promotion, place, and people. So they were the things, and then you break that down into teams, and you say, okay, well, let's do the strategies for customer, let's do the strategies for product, etc. And you come up with a long shopping list of things to do, and I think this is where you can completely lose yourself if you don't put this into a time horizons, because everyone will run off and everyone will try and do everything in 3, 6, 9, or 12 months. So the alchemy of growth, or the 3 horizons, is quite good because it then starts to break it down into, in terms of the things that you need to do now to defend your business, to make, and this is a bit like fix. It's like, what do you need to do to actually make sure the business is operational, make sure it's efficient, make sure it's coming out of losing money. So you have your defend or your fix and strategies that you do in year 1. Because if you don't do those, then you know that the business isn't going to be successful. And then I think as you're looking to go into your next phase or your growth mechanisms or the reset mechanisms in your framework, is then what are the things or the building blocks? Once you've got that base sorted out in terms of being stable and being efficient and operating in an effective way, what are the initiatives or the building blocks that help you then to grow into the next year or the year after? And then you layer those initiatives in. And then the last one is then in terms of your seeding initiatives, what are the initiatives that are going to help you really scale in 3, 5, or 10 years time that you need to start to seed because they'll take longer to grow. So I think one from a capacity point of view and one from a resourcing point of view, you just need to make sure you're pacing that change over multiple years. And then the really important piece in all of this is how you map the dependencies, because with a lot of strategies that you build out, are they going to need money? Are they going to need external resources? Are you going to need a new IT system? Are you going to need a level of sign off with your board, etc.? So mapping out how they all hang together and how they relate to each other is super important, and that will then determine your roadmap in terms of the order that you do things in as well. So yeah, they're relatively simple frameworks and you can use a few different ways to build them out. But I think managing the pace of the business is super important, because what a lot of people forget is you've still got a big business to run, and BAU still needs to take up a large proportion of people's time.
The bit there on dependencies rings a bell for me. I was only doing a workshop very recently where we had about a 7-year plan down on a huge off-site workshop, and we put the critical path in these big swim lanes on the ground. So we had like people and growth and all this kind of stuff, operations. We had to build this enormous journey map. And what was amazing is we then got out this red tape and all these little, imagine post-it notes for key tasks over this sort of 7 years and all these different swim lanes. People were standing up on chairs looking at this amazing map, and then we did the critical path. And what happened, Jamie? I realized there were some things that were just not in the right order, right? And I actually think the original plan was about 5 years, but as soon as we actually got the critical path right, you jumped to 7. And their entire business case the net present value started to drop off because there's 2 more years. And it was just a big, big problem. So this was without doing that, the managing dependencies and the critical path, you can actually be flying blind directly into a massive problem.
Right, Chiefs, more from Jamie in a minute. Now, recently we had Paula Martin, Executive Director of the Regional New South Wales and the Visitor Economy at Business New South Wales on the show. We spoke about learning from everyone, adapting to shorter strategy cycles, and genuinely receiving feedback. Here's what Paula had to say about imagining success.
And she came up with this statement that was an attempt for all of us to rewire our thinking. It simply started with, imagine if you could, imagine if this happened, imagine. And that concept of imagining is also something that we don't give ourselves time in our day to do as leaders, but it is actually a critical output of leadership, because you need to imagine scenarios, you need to imagine a future, you need to imagine growth, you need to imagine what success looks like.
You can listen to that wonderful conversation with Paula by going to chiefmaker.com/383. Righto, Chief, let's get back to our discussion with Jamie Kristow, CEO of Cotswold Outdoor Group.
Jamie, we don't have forever. I would love to keep going, but I want us to move on to the final questions that all chiefs have to answer. We've got a new question, which I've never asked on the show, especially for you.
Fantastic.
What are you currently doing in your personal work or the way you personally operate using AI or technology to make your life easier and just general everyday work practice?
The two new major things that we're doing are retail media. So I've spoken about that one already. That's one of the biggest projects that we're kicking off. The other one that we're investing in heavily at the moment is leveraging AI in pricing. So that one is super interesting, and it depends a little bit on what you sell in terms of, if you're selling products that are commonly found in the marketplace, price is such an important lever to play. And even in private label, it's important. You have to just line yourself up against like brands or like products. But in our current economic times, price has always been important, but it's super important at the moment. And as I said earlier, because consumers now have more technology at their disposal in terms of search, in terms of navigating what they want to buy, it's very easy for a consumer now to sweep the market on price. And I think consumers are rightly so demanding more transparency out of retailers on price, and they can get that through different apps or different software tools. So AI pricing, we're finding, is super important. We've recently launched an AI pricing module, and the results have been pretty instant in terms of uptick on where we're competitive. Now,
Wow.
pricing is not just about the cheapest price. I mean, understanding price elasticity in terms of where products need to sit and where they sit at different locations is really interesting. And part of the world that we're grappling at the moment is challenging some of the existing norms around one price across stores and across online, because the online world behaves completely different to the physical store world. It has a different set of economics, different market competitive activities. And in the UK at the moment, we're actually not just competing with UK retailers, we're competing with European retailers that are penetrating the UK market. So it's just a much bigger platform or a much bigger world to play on. So we're using AI to help us with that, because what we found is that if we have a pricing manager in the business, that person just doesn't have the bandwidth to look at every SKU, every day, every location, looking at stock sell through, competitive pricing. And we've always had a level of web scraping to understand where we are on price, but just the sheer complexity of running 20,000 SKUs and understanding what the right pricing and margin strategy is at different channel levels, really complex. So we're using now an AI tool that can do all that grunt work that then serves up to us in a dashboard to say, okay, this is where you sit versus the market. This is the products that the customers are most searching for, because I think that's really important. You don't just want to be low price on everything because you'll never make any money. But how do you make sure, coming back to the customer, that you have a good price perception? And when we did some customer research about 6 months ago, we found that we weren't perceived that well from a value for money point of view. So we now want to make sure that we are at the right price on the right items. So our price perception is where it needs to be. So yeah, it's quite fun, but it's super important to make sure that you're competitive.
Okay, if you could lead the ultimate executive team from any well-known person from any time in history, who would your first three picks be?
I'm going to say, from a product point of view, Paul Smith, famous UK designer, I think
Yes.
has done a great job of navigating fashion over time, and just his attention to detail is just unbelievable. So I go with Paul from a fashion and a product point of view. From a marketing point of view, I'd say Phil Knight from Nike. I think what he done with time is just stands for itself. And then I'm going to go back to my South Africa experience. From a people and from a culture point of view, I'd say Nelson Mandela. In terms of the how he was regarded and the connection that he had with the entire country and what he did for that country and what he did in terms of people's emotion and motivating change, I think he would be second to none from a people point of view.
What is your number one interview question for hiring people to your executive team?
I think once you've got through all the technical stuff and you've got to know them, and then I'd like to wrap up the interview with why us and why now?
What are you looking for when they, we'll make sure no one who's applying for a job listens to this.
Giving it away. I think the us bit is what's magnetic about coming to work for us. I want to understand, I want there to be a level of passion in terms of why come and work with us, work for our company, work for our brand. I think that's really important. I think it helps to explore if they have a brand connection and a culture connection on both sides. And I think why now is good because it helps them to talk about their situation, why they're looking for a job, why they're looking for a next change, and why now is the right time. Because I think that's also super important to then have for them to be really clear. And I think it also then it helps hold the conversation to account. It's like, well, why did you want to come to us and why was now at the right time? So I think it just magnetically pulls together those things and I think if there's a weak answer to that question, we're not the right one or now's not the right time. But if you get a really good, strong answer to that question, it helps me really galvanize if they're the right person for us or not.
Can you nominate another chief you hold with great respect for the podcast?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Brendan Santamaria from Seafolly.
Seafolly, yes.
Yeah, great Australian business. And Brendan is a good CEO who's led a number of businesses over time. And yeah, he's a good guy. It'd be good for the show, I think.
Wonderful. If you could lead any company, organization anywhere in the world, what would it be?
I'm a bit of an F1 fan, so I'm going to say McLaren F1. So British team doing a really good job of bringing professional sport and also commerce together in terms of how it's evolved, how it's changing, the amount of money that's involved.
Exactly. All right, Jamie, what is a final message of wisdom and hope?
I think that my key learning over time is believe in yourself. You're not going to know everything about everything on day one, job two. So you just got to keep evolving and believing in your instincts, and continue to focus on health and family. And never over prioritize work. You've always got to get that balance right. Because if you're not healthy, you can't look after your family. And if you're not happy at home or things aren't good outside of work, then work's never going to be any good either. So I think if you get those priorities right, continue to believe in yourself, and I'll end it with be accountable. If you can have those sort of things in the right balance, then I think life will generally be quite good.
Jamie Kristow, fantastic, mate. Thanks for coming on the show.
Appreciate it, Greg. Thanks very much.
All right, Chiefs, that sums it up for this week with the remarkable Jamie Kristow. A few parts that I absolutely loved in that episode when he waxed lyrical about the value chain of the retail business is just absolutely magic. And the way he's innovating around the use of digital media and the media in the modern world, just really quite remarkable. So Chief, all the links and resources for this episode can be found at chiefmaker.com/384. And if you would like to stay in touch and hear all about some of the best resources that you can find anywhere in the world to improve your performance at work, go to chiefmaker.com/ subscribe. Now, Chief, if you're yet to rate the episode and subscribe, I hope you'll do so soon. It helps others see the magnificent value that the chiefs and gurus bring to their life and career. So make sure you hit subscribe on your podcast app now, give it a 5-star rating if you think it's worthy, and leave a short review about your favourite episode. Righto, Chiefs, as always, remember to stay epic.